Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thakur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Thakur Hari Bol, Thakur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Thakur Hari. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Jaya Nitilo Vishnavad Bhagavan Sabhabhajakacharya Satada Sata Sri Simani Damangres Abhaya Charna Binda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sigaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaur Bhaktivinda Ki Sisi Radha Krishna Gopinath Syama Kunda Radha Kundi Giri Govinda Ki, Vrindavan Dham Ki, Mayapur Dham Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Sri Sri Gaudiya Guru Varga Ki, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories assembled devotees, all glories assembled devotees, all glories assembled devotees, all glories of Sri Guru and Gauranga glories to the Prabhupada Ki Jai. So welcome everyone to this glorification of Srila Prabhupada. I'll introduce the folks on my left. We have Srimati Bhavatarini Devi Dasi, who was initiated in 1972 by Srila Prabhupada, and her husband, Nrihari Prabhu, who was initiated in 1973. Very stalwart disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And my name is Mahabuddhi Das. I was initiated in 1973 also. So we have a few recollections from Srila Prabhupada to tell you. So how do we get this over there? Haribo, can we get this over there?
Mataji?
Yeah. She's going to start.
How long should we each speak? It's 6. It's till 6:30. It's 5:10.
5 to 6:30.
5 to yeah. It's 5:10 now. So we can each speak. So. Okay. Om Agina Taranjasha Gina Gina Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Jena Tajmaye Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Kauravani Pacharane Nevasesha Sunyavari Pastacha Desha Tarane. I offer my unlimited obeisances unto my eternal spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and beg for his causeless mercy, and to my Param Guru Dev, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, to our Guru Varga, my Shiksha Gurus, and all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavis assembled here tonight, and beg for your causeless mercy. So I'm from America, and I met Srila Prabhupada in 1971. And tonight, instead of telling stories, I wanted to talk about Srila Prabhupada's Vapu, because on the 29th, it will be the day that he disappeared from our vision. And most people don't know what it was like to be in his presence. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in a purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the pure devotee is emanating saffron particles of prema, which enter into the hearts of all and every living entity in his presence. So I wanted to discuss how I was able to see Prabhupada's manifest form, his divine form, using my 5 material senses, my mind, intelligence, and as my husband said, even my false ego and my heart, and what it was like to be in his presence and experience his personal and manifest form. So, of course, first I heard about him, but you can hear about many people and then never see them. And so my first experience was seeing him. And this was in the airport in Atlanta, Georgia in 1971. And Srila Prabhupada flew in. He flew from New York to Gainesville to be on a television show. And then on his way back, he spent 2.5 hours in the Atlanta airport. So we had a room and we decorated it. We made a little vyasasan for him to sit on. And we're all waiting. At that time, you could go out to where the airplanes landed, and people would walk down the steps and then across the tarmac and enter the airport. So we are waiting for Srila Prabhupada and chanting Hare Krishna. I don't remember how many people there were, maybe 50. And the doors opened and people started pouring out of the plane down the steps. And suddenly the door lit up. And there was Srila Prabhupada standing with his head held high, wearing silk saffron robes. And there seemed to be somehow or other some mystical wind blowing his cloth. And he was holding a cane, wearing a marigold garland. And he began walking down the steps, and my impression was of a lion, very regal. And then he came down the steps and began walking across the tarmac, but it seemed that his feet didn't touch the ground. He was floating across the ground. So after that, he entered in, and then there was his fragrance. There was always the smell of sandalwood and whatever flowers, roses, gardenias, and the incense from where he'd been, where there'd been puja. And it was just entered the nostrils and took you to another level of consciousness. And then, of course, I only had physical contact with him twice when I put garlands on him, but many people massaged him, put his shoes on him, so many things, and they always said that his form was very soft and smooth. And one time I got to wash his clothes, which were silk, and I was thinking, oh, maybe this is like his touch. And another time here in Vrindavan, they had some material for him to stand in to make the forms for all the feet that we have. You know how we have the lotus feet and the imprints. And right after he left, they called me in the room, and I got to touch where he'd been standing. And to stay on touch. One time, a woman, I was at the Los Angeles temple, and a woman was from Indonesia, and she was working on her master's in film. And so for her thesis, she needed to do a film. So her topic of the film, excuse me, can you please not talk? Excuse me, can you please not speak while I'm talking? Thank you. So the theme of her film was how anyone could take to Krishna consciousness, even a single mother, which I was at the time. So she wanted to start the film with Srila Prabhupada on his morning walk at Venice Beach. And she wanted me to be walking with Srila Prabhupada on the walk. At that time, usually no women were on the walk, just sannyasis and temple presidents, and actually Swarup Damodar was doing the dialogue, which became the book, which book was that? Life Comes from Life, I think. So Brahmananda was there with Srila Prabhupada, and he gave me permission to do the film. So she's walking in front of Srila Prabhupada filming, and I believe Yadabar was there also, and Bhargava. So there were 3 or 4 people filming. And in order not to get knocked out of the walk, I walked in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps on the beach in the sand. And I don't know if that was offensive, but it was very relishable. And as far as taste goes, every morning he would go enter the temple room in Los Angeles and pay obeisances, dandavats to the 3 altars and take Charnamrita. And then afterwards we would all take Charnamrita, and it seemed something like, using your sense of taste to know Srila Prabhupada. And one time, many times I got remnants, but one of my favorites was a piece of grapefruit that he had sucked all the juice out of. So I had the rind and the pulp, and I, of course, ate every bit of it. And one time, I was doing bake sales in Hawaii, and I was making cookies and carob brownies, and they offered everything to Srila Prabhupada instead of just to the deities. And Srila Prabhupada ate half of a brownie, had them wrap it in saran wrap, and sent it to me with a message, "Have Bhavatarini eat this." So that's, and that, of course, I have never tasted anything like that before or since. And of course, the heart. And then in classes, like Srila Prabhupada seemed to be looking at, like, not every time, but in some of the classes, it was like the description of Krishna taking lunch with the cowherd boys. Srila Prabhupada was looking at me, but everyone else had the same experience. So maybe that's how I used my false ego to perceive Srila Prabhupada. But then he also communicated. I actually had a conversation with him that was just for me, and I had letters from him. But even without that, I would wait with my children when he went for his morning walk, and we'd have different exchanges. And he could communicate with you with the lifting of an eyebrow. And one time, in the beginning, when I was just beginning to be around Srila Prabhupada, he would come into the room to greet the deities, and I would be jumping up and down yelling, "Prabhupada, Prabhupada," but almost like a cheerleader at a football game or something. So I'm jumping up and down, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, and I look, and Srila Prabhupada's this far away from me, and he didn't say anything, but he lifted his eyebrow and looked at me, and he, like, what? You know, what do you want? And I didn't have anything to say. So, of course, I just paid obeisances. And at that point, my impersonalism and my petty idea of him like a rock star or something, it went away, and my relationship with him began. And another time, my 3-year-old daughter, I heard that Prabhupada had asked Saraswati's parents to shave her baby hair off. So I had a 3-year-old, and I thought, oh, I should shave her head. So I tried to cut her hair and shave her head, and she ran away and hid until it was time to go to bed. And the next morning at Bhagavatam class, she's sitting there with this choppy hair and holes, and it's all sticking up. And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and like, what? You know, but I didn't speak to him. And then later on, the next day, with her head shaved, he approved. He gave me an approving look. And we were discussing, my husband and I and some other of my godbrothers and godsisters, how even though sometimes there were 200 people in the class with Srila Prabhupada, we all had a view of him unobstructed on the Vyasasana. I don't know how. And we would watch him in detail, how elegantly he played the gong or the cartels, and sometimes he'd play with the tassel on the, but everything he did was so elegant. And actually the first time I saw him, we served him some watermelon, and then they had a whole feast for him. So he took one piece of watermelon with 2 fingers and a thumb, and he threw his head back and popped it into his mouth. And then after that, they closed the room divider so he could eat in private. But the most significant thing was the sound, just hearing him chant. And when he spoke, he could be saying something apparently mundane, but it would go directly to your heart. And even when he left the room, you could still feel the sound vibration and the prem, and the whole room was surcharged. And he would say, we'd be perfectly happy, he'd say, is everyone happy? Is everyone all right? And due to what they call shadow attachment, we were all in the spiritual world in his presence. And we'd all go, yes, Srila Prabhupada, Jai, Srila Prabhupada. And then he would leave the room, and a few minutes later, we'd be looking at each other and wishing that my sari was better, or what, you know. So, but while in his presence, we were all transported to the spiritual world. And he used to begin his classes with like an opening line. And then they were very astonishing and slightly humorous, and very humorous. My favorite is, he begins, devotees are not moral. And then he says, just see, here, Hiranyakashipu is killing Prahlad's father. Not only he is not protesting, I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. Nrihari is killing Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad's father. Not only Prahlad is not protesting, but he is offering a garland to the murderer. This is not moral. Then he spoke so many things, and for at least 45 minutes, and before you knew it, he was back where he had started and finished the class. And then he would say chant, and someone would lead kirtan. So Oh, yes. One time he was beginning the class, he said, Vasudeva and Devaki had to suffer so much because they had a material desire. They asked God, or Krishna, Narayan, they wanted a son just like Krishna, but there was no possibility of anyone being just like Krishna, so he had to take birth as their son. But because of this, they suffered so much. And then he spoke on, and then he mentioned again but he said, the gopis, they never asked Krishna for anything. And then he went into ecstasy. He was looking at the picture of Radha and Krishna and the 8 principal gopis, and we were just stunned. Srila Prabhupada was in ecstasy, and we didn't know what to do. So for a few minutes, everyone in the room was silent with our mouths open, looking at Srila Prabhupada in ecstasy. And then Srila Prabhupada went like this and said, chant. And we all began a kirtan. So he was always so personal. When he left Bombay to come to Vrindavan, to his pastimes, to leave, I went to the train station with my 3 daughters. My son was in the Gurukula. And I went there, and my daughter and 3 daughters and I went up to the car, and Srila Prabhupada was so weak, and there weren't any devotees around. There was no kirtan party, so we started chanting, and Srila Prabhupada had them roll down the window, and he, blessed us, and then they carried him to the train. He was so weak. And I don't remember who it was, but someone came back and said, Srila Prabhupada's requested that you come on the train. So we went, and Srila Prabhupada was on one berth, and they had us sit down across from him, and we sat on the train. He was actually too weak to be chanting. We sat on the train, and I chanted japa with my 3 daughters. And then when the train started moving, we left. And just being right there, Srila Prabhupada was like from the size of this table away from us. And we were just transported to the spiritual world, and we could understand and feel in our hearts what love of God is. Of course, the most important thing is to remember is that Srila Prabhupada his father would always say, please bless my son to become a great devotee of Radharani. And he would say, so everyone is chasing after Krishna, but Krishna is chasing after Radharani. So this Krishna Prem that Srila Prabhupada, on behalf of Lord Chaitanya, is giving us is imbued with the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, with the leaning towards Radharani. And when Srila Prabhupada left, at that time, most of us were just learning that Krishna was God. So I'm going to quit in a minute. And so he left, and afterwards we were thinking, we didn't love Krishna, we just loved Srila Prabhupada. And we could walk or drive in a car or take a train or a plane or a bicycle or a tunga, and wherever Srila Prabhupada was, we could go see him. But now, if we wanted to see him, we had to develop pure love of Krishna, because he was with Krishna. And everyone in the temple here, after he entered Samadhi, was only thinking of Srila Prabhupada and feeling so much love and affection for all our God brothers and God sisters. So that was the influence of his Vapu. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions before I turn the mic over to someone else? Would anyone have a question? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. Ansha kalpatarubhascha kripasindhu cheva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hare Krishna. Om Agnati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militanyena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasarine Nirvishesha Shunyabari Paschachahadi Satarine. I can tell of my first encounter with Srila Prabhupada. I had already been initiated, and it was just about a month after the initiation, or less than that. And interesting enough, I mean, what came first? Actually, Srila Prabhupada was so humble, but so powerful, still is. And you can see how many people are being now transformed, still now. And there's more to come. So the first thing that happened in the planet, not all of you were there in the 60s, and there were very trying times. But the first things that appeared was the Mahamantra brought by Srila Prabhupada. And so us as youth, we were exposed first to the Mahamantra through our idols. And that time for us, most of us, we loved the Beatles. And George Harrison was prominent and coming even out with the album of the Mahamantra. And I remember my friends, we sat down to hear it, and most of them thought it was repetitive and boring. I was very attracted. So, 1971, I met the devotees for the first time at Berkeley at the university. I had taken 1 year off. I was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And my father, after me persisting, he let me go to come to America. I was in pursuit of searching. Most of us were searchers, or just that we weren't. Even the movement of the hippies, the ideals were about freedom, love, peace, and we didn't know how to find it. We didn't know how to, you know. So it was in 71 that I met the devotees, and I got my first BTG, and my first Simply Wonderful, right there on Telegraph Avenue. So after that, I kept on traveling and searching for the truth. And since I was a child, actually, I asked, I was raised Catholic, and I asked, you know, you're trained when you're 6 years old, be trained to take the first communion. And my first question was, where is the soul? What is the soul? And the answer was, my teacher said, well, it's somewhere in your body, and if you're a good boy, that will go to heaven. That wasn't satisfactory enough. So anyhow, that was the search. Many of us, many of the devotees came from very good families, and they were searchers. So I went to wherever I went to, the youth movement, everybody had concerts and like that, devotees were there. The Mahamantra was there. So I made it all the way to England with the idea of coming to India. And circumstances was that my visa ran out, and I had to leave England. I went back to Buenos Aires. And my idea was actually, I was already a vegetarian. I believed in reincarnation, and we had Bhagavad Gita as it is. Buenos Aires is a pretty cultural city, so most of the middle class was educated in Europe or America. And so I came across Bhagavad Gita, but it was, not very attractive, the impersonal feature of it. So fast forward, I met my first, another devotee. Actually, it was a sannyas, Hanuman Goswami at that time, and he was in a corner, and he said, I said, you speak English? Are you Hare Krishna? I said, yes. He said, I'm looking for, he gave me a card. Actually, no, he said, I'm looking for a paint. I just opening a temple here. It was in Buenos Aires. And I said, I can take you to a hardware store. I know where there is one. And so as I took him there, we departed. He gave me a card. And in the meantime, my sister was one of my best friends. She was 11 years older than me. Later on became Bhaktadasi and art director for BBT, pre-press. And so she said, I went to the park, and my daughter was a year old at that time, Gangamai. He pulled her across the street to go hear the devotees chanting. So all this is just to give an idea of the power of Srila Prabhupada and how he sent out. And later on I met Brahmananda Prabhu Maharaj, that he said, yes, I was actually the first one to come to Buenos Aires. But in meeting Govinda Dasi, and she said, Prabhupada was already inspiring them. He says, go, you have to go, because they're already calling me. There's so many of them, they're calling me. And that just blew my mind, because before becoming a devotee, with my sister, we were, of course, experimenting with LSD, and I took her out from the city, and we went to Patagonia in the south. Amazing place. Still, it was pretty empty, whatever else society could offer us, and I had a pretty good career, a good situation. She was pretty wealthy, but we saw that there was just no satisfaction in the world. And so she said, well, what's the use? I might as well commit suicide. And I said, no, wait, I know there is someone in the planet, he might not even be from this planet, that is going to help us, going to save us. So anyhow, fast forward, what really glued me to the movement and made me join was that actually Hanuman, at that time, French Canadian, at that time didn't know the language too well, Castilian, Spanish, and so I had to translate the books, Prabhupada's books, while he was speaking, and prepare for the class. So I would do the verse and the purport, and then he would lecture on that, and I would explain sometimes. So, and my favorite was Srimad Bhagavatam. He invited me to come after my first feast, next day, to Srimad Bhagavatam class. And I love history. I was always fascinated by world history, but there were things missing. And I remember in the history class, there was just about maybe 2 pages on India, a little bit on mentions of the Upanishads and Puranas, but that was it. And we had chapters on Greek history and all of that. So when I hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada put it all together for me in the preface of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I took initiation and became editor of Prabhupada's books. And my sister, with her knowledge of printing, we reprinted the books. But they had to be edited. The translations were very poor. And so with those 3 books, we traveled to see Srila Prabhupada and meet him in Los Angeles. So my first meeting, since I already had read some of his literature, which that would make me join, I was petrified. The room became 10 times the size. Prabhupada all of a sudden it was that far away. And I don't know if you've been in Los Angeles, but the room is not that big. His office is not that big. And anyhow, Prabhupada introduced us, my sister and I, and he begged forgiveness because he married my sister actually as a sannyasi. It was the first scandal, I guess, in society. Prabhupada, he said, no, it's fine. Now you're 2, you preach double. So his compassion, his mercy, and his vision about preaching, that was most important to him. So he looked at me and said, oh, you look very aristocratic, but no word would come out of me. It was like I brought all my karma with me, and mountains of karma, and didn't know what to say. But he kept motion to me to come closer to him. So he was sitting here, and I finally ended up sitting where Prabhu is, right here, on the floor. And Prabhupada, like my wife said, he could say a word with just like one eyebrow. And so he looked at me and said, what'd you bring me? Oh, yes, I was clenching the books. And so Prabhupada took him, and you should see his face. He was like a child in a candy factory. I don't know. I mean, it's like his eyes became so big, he smiled, And then he proceeded to read the titles in perfect Castilian. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, Prabhupada speaks Spanish. Wow, amazing. And Prabhupada turned and he quoted a verse that I had to learn. I'm sorry. No? And he said, Krishna speaks even the birds' languages. So my rapport, my relationship with Srila Prabhupada from then on, and I was allowed to be with him. Sometimes just the 2 of us, I would just keep quiet, be there. It was pretty telepathic. I was privy to, he was a genius actually in illustrating something, like for example, how this material world is kind of phantasmagoria. So we were walking one morning. It was pretty much about maybe 10 men. Most of them were all GBC, sannyasis, Madhuvisa Prabhu Maharaj. Then even Siddhasa Rupananda Maharaj was there. Chaitirtha Prabhu, and we were taking Prabhupada to a tent. It was a big pandal with all the pictures of all the deities around the world. And so before we get there, this is dawn, the sun is just coming out, barely. And Prabhupada all of a sudden points at the ground, and there is, what is it? There was a rope. I said, you see, that rope last night, it would have been noticed as a snake. But now the sun came out, and it's so easy to see that that's a rope. So one day, he said, when you wake up, when Krishna comes in your heart, when it will eliminate everything, all the real objects will be there, everything will be very clear to you. And so he was serious that morning. There was a lot of discussions going on among my godbrothers, and it was all this zonal thing. And so my Prabhupada stopped and said, we actually have the real United Nation. We have the real United Nations. They add on more and more nations, but all they do is fight. So we kept on walking, and Prabhupada entered the pandal, and tell the truth, it seemed like Prabhupada was a little annoyed at the inner fighting that was going on. It was argument, of course, we're so passionate, and everybody wanted to do the best they could to serve Srila Prabhupada. So he was a little competitive. And so we entered the pandal, and one of the sides was a little loose, and the children figured out very quickly that Prabhupada was in there. So they kept on peeking and calling Prabhupada out. And Prabhupada dropped us in a way. He grabbed his cane and he was doing like he was going to chase him, start playing hide and seek. And the children were laughing. And then he turned to us and said, "See, old men and children make friends very fast." So we continued. There were other morning walks were like pretty serious, one of them. I never saw Prabhupada angry, and tell you the truth, I mean, you didn't want to be around. It felt like the whole planet shook. So this time we were walking up on the rooftop of the Mayapur building, the only building at that time. And this might be a little strong, but anyhow, it was to illustrate how much he cared about the children and the next generation coming. So news were brought that Jagaman, one of the Gurukula boys, was found in Vidyanagar, the train station. And Prabhupada said, "Why? What happened?" So Prabhupada, the teacher wouldn't feed him for 2 days. Prabhupada said, "What?" He stopped, he hit the cane. I thought the roof was going to break in two, open up. And he said, "Who's the teacher? A child should never be treated that way." He said, "That teacher should be hanged." Those are strong words. So that's, just to illustrate, a little bit how serious, how much love Prabhupada have for that second generation. And there was other things that they occurred actually. Another morning walk, and that really stuck with me too. It was we were walking, and I thought he was a brahmachari, but actually Bhavananda is Prabhu. He's in a film with Siddhanta Prabhu, where so we were walking with Prabhupada. There was a little rubble and a little wall, so Prabhupada had to come up. So Bhavananda Prabhu just jumped real fast and grabbed Prabhupada's hand. He held him up to come up to the top, and where Prabhupada could go to the other side. And when Prabhupada got to the top, he hit Bhavananda's hand. He just pushed it away like that, hit it. He said, "You see, that's the difference between the Mayavads and us." He said, the Mayavadis, when they get to the top, they push the spiritual master aside. I thought that was it stayed with me it was very important, I think, that instruction. So another time, there were many darshans, and many times Srila Prabhupada, I came with Gargamuni Swami, so my dream of coming to India came as a gift from Srila Prabhupada, and it was to travel across Europe all the way to India, and we have bought 6 brand new Mercedes-Benz vans, and my dear friend Keshava, who came to Buenos Aires, was in there. Actually, he called me one time. He showed up at my place, and this was 1975. And he said, "Oh, this was right after Prabhupada came to my house." Well, that's another story. But he said, we organized a party, and Gargamuni Swami is the head of it. And why don't you come? Let's go collect for Mayapur Chandadoya, who's just starting. And so we did. We went across, and when we arrived, and I was like the only non-sannyasa, I think, in the room. Oh, Keshava too was brahmachari. But I saw Prabhupada, how happy he was that we'd done that, and he immediately ordered to ask Gargamuni to prepare one of those buses. He was ready to come with us. He was a preacher, he always was. And of course, devotees, senior devotees, Bhavananda, I think, nixed the whole thing. But I saw with my own eyes how Prabhupada was hitting Gargamuni's back. Gargamuni he did flat dandavats, flat obeisances on the ground, and Prabhupada was like, smile so big, petting his back. Yeah. Actually, it was hitting his back. Inadumna Swami told us this amazing story about how Prabhupada hit him in the back. He said, "Oh, it was so hard. I still feel it." And so, yes, Srila Prabhupada came to my house one time, and again, the front door was a French bevel glass. We call it French door, like. So you can see through, and that night, one of the nights, the devotee, I guess one of the devotees said, "No, you can come in, we're just so small." I couldn't come in my own house. But I heard Prabhupada was a little upset about the tables. We were like polishing those floors so well that the tables would keep moving forward. He couldn't touch him, or he liked to lean back and put his knees sometimes, and sometimes his foot. Yeah. So I made him a table that was anchored to the ground. I figured out the distance, everything was just perfect, So I wanted to know, so I came in one day, and then, I invented an excuse. I said, I forgot my camera, and I know where it is. And so, okay, just quickly, that was Rameshwar Prabhu. And so I went to the closet, and my lack of sukriti, as we would say, Prabhupada was taking a shower. So I couldn't dilly-dally anymore, and I took the camera and I went out. But that night, Prabhupada gave me several gifts, actually. In order to come up to the house, there were 2 steps, and then so I sat on the steps, and all of a sudden Prabhupada came out, went to his desk, sat down, and what did he do? He put his foot on the table, and he we had like I said, a dialogue. It was pretty, he knew I was there on the other side of the door, and there was glass, but no material thing could come between you and your spiritual master. That's his potency. And so he did put his foot on the table and didn't move, so he did a sign of approval. And then he took his Brahmin thread and proceeded to say Gayatri. So, I said, this is my chance. I can say Gayatri. I'm on the other side, and of course, so far away, where he chants, the pure devotee, when they chant the mantras, he's there with Krishna, Radha Krishna, he's serving. We chant that every morning. Nikunja Juna Radhikali Sithai. He's there serving. So I was down here on planet Earth, trying to, of course I remember the mantras, but chanting them. But so he did give me some gifts of, and then next morning, my good friend Nanda Kumar was a servant of Srila Prabhupada. I had collected also some, I heard that Prabhupada liked to chew on twigs. Of neem preferably, and eucalyptus was his second favorite. The oil too, we used to, one time, as a toothbrush. So we chew the end, and then we'll brush his teeth, and then semi-break the little twig, and use it as a tongue scraper. So I had brought him a few of them, about 5 or so, whatever, and I left him, there was a dresser, so I left him there. We prepared the room. All the devotees came forward with brand new bed. I mean, the whole place got transformed. But the collection of Srimad Bhagavatam that we called my first wife, covered them with Mahaprasad, actually from the material that was used for the Vyasasan. So that day, Prabhupada spent 1 night, 2 days. He came in the morning of one day to our place and spent the night and left in the afternoon. No, left in the morning, I think, by noon. And so he actually he was reading from, actually the devotees gave the Srimad Bhagavatam to the devotees to read to a professor from UCSD. And that was the only picture I was able to take, actually, of Prabhupada entering the car to go to the house. So anyhow, sorry to make it long, I was able to get Nanda Kumar, my dear friend. He said, come in. There's Maha. Really? So I got shavings from Prabhupada's. They shaved Prabhupada that day, shaved his head, shaved him. And there were twigs that he had used. He also puffies he had left. Nanda Kumar prepared him some puffies that time, and it was the most delicious puffies. So I'm talking too long? Okay. Oh, yes. So many qualities Prabhupada had, you all know, and there's been so many very illustrious God brothers and God sisters have spoken about it. One time I remember Prabhupada gave me also very practical things, as teachings. And so I had been, my second initiation, I was able to be in the room for hours. And it was the day, we went actually to Guatemala. And I took, Hanuman called me on the phone and said, come quickly. I was in San Diego, and he said, Prabhupada's going to be in Mexico City, and it's a great chance. So I got a chance to receive my second initiation that fortunately devotees forgot about me every time, So 2 years went by, and so I received the Gayatri mantra from Srila Prabhupada, and so that was the first time that he taught me, and grabbed my hand, my thumb, and so to show me how to count, and so that afternoon I brought Dakshin to Srila Prabhupada, or maybe perhaps a couple of days later, because we went to Guatemala, and I bought an onyx box, some honey, and a wool blanket, beautiful wool blanket. And so when I came in the room to see Srila Prabhupada, and it was the last day he was there, so the room was a little busy. At that time, Nitai was a translator, but Pradyumna had come with him. Srutakirti was there too. In and out. Everybody was, Prabhupada's directing. And I noticed that on his desk, he had put the honey. And so I was thinking to myself, I was at the opposite wall, and I was thinking, how do I please him? I wish he could taste the honey, see if it was good. So in the middle of Prabhupada directing everybody, he looked at me and said, you can't eat honey right away. You have to wait 1 year. It's toxic when it's fresh. And then continue on to direct everybody. So yeah, my relationship was like that. I didn't have like serious conversations, because Prabhupada said everything is in my book, so I feel like an idiot. What am I going to ask? It's really clarified. And I remember being with
You're over.
I'm over? Okay. So Prabhu, Hare Krishna, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I tend to speak a lot, and there were so many opportunities to be with Srila Prabhupada and hear from him. So thank you for the opportunity to give a little bit of what it was to be with Srila Prabhupada. The relationship continues, and it should be, it's not just Bapu, like he instructed us. He called us one night at night, sorry, it's 1 second, and he said, time out, bing, bing. And so at 10:30 at night, when you get a call from Prabhupada, I'll say, oh my God, what's going on? What did I do? And but so Prabhupada, Hanuman entered the room, and the two of us entered, and he said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I'm sorry, but I don't get along with my God brothers. And Prabhupada laughed. He said, I didn't get along with mine either. And so Prabhupada, Hanuman asked, but when you leave, are you going to leave someone as an acharya like that? Prabhupada said, no. I want all of you to come to standard. And Yaretaho Tarikaho Krishna Upadesh. All of you become verse and make everybody follow the orders of Krishna's and Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. But he said, he went serious, he said, but the secret of my success, and he counted on his hands, he said, well, I only met my spiritual master 10 times. Distributed means that give knowledge to everybody. And so the relationship continues, and we should know that Prabhupada is not dead. Doesn't it say? With that who follows instructions will live with Guru forever. Dandavas Prabhu, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhuvaivacha, Patitanam Pavanibhyo, Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Sorry, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
One more time. I didn't ever wake everyone to be had a long hour of introducing discussions. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Hare Hare. I didn't even hear you guys. Come on. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare. Who popularized that? Who popularized the Mahamantra? Who popularized the Mahamantra?
Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada. Did any of you ever hear the Mahamantra? Those maybe not living in India, you may have heard. But anyone in the West ever hear the Hare Krishna mantra before Prabhupada came here? Anyone? Did any of you? I didn't. Did any of you? I'm not hearing any answer. This is no. So who's Prabhupada? Prabhupada's coming from a long lineage. And we all know what Sampradaya is. We're coming in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. I'm going to knock it over, so it's going to push it out a little bit. He's coming from the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, which means he's coming from Lord Krishna to Brahma, all the way down to Narada Muni, then Vyasadeva, then Madhvacharya, then all the way coming down through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to the 6 Goswamis, all the way Krishnadas Kaviraj, Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivas Shyamananda, all the way down to Vishwanath Chakravarti, Baladev Vidyabhusan, Jagannath Das Babaji, then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, then Gaurkishore Das Babaji, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and then Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was predicted in 1896 by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that someone will take birth very shortly who will spread this Krishna consciousness all over the world. That's Srila Prabhupada. First and foremost, Prabhupada was not an ordinary man. He was a direct descending coming down to the spiritual world. Therefore, we cannot see him, he came and he was the grihasta and he worked just like us. He gave these things as Leela. So first, let me offer my obeisances. I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the representative of both Srimati Radharani and Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Not an ordinary thing. Om Agnyatamarandasya Gyananjana Salakaye Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadandikam. Tesam satata yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. So Srila Prabhupada, my first recollection of Srila Prabhupada was I had made a vow when I was 13 years old that I wanted to know the absolute truth because I was somewhat dissatisfied. I won't go into the details because it's about Prabhupada. So I made a vow, and for like 7 years I read all of the Old Testament, New Testament, Quran, all the Buddhist, Confucius, scriptures, some of the Hindu literatures, all sorts of different religious philosophies. But at the end, I didn't know who God was. So I had a serious, concept. I'm trying to find you, but how am I supposed to find you? I don't even know who you are. Maybe some of you had a similar recollection in your own lives. So I was in a university at that time. After, many years, I said 6, 7 years of study independently. So I read almost every book in religion in the bookstore. So I went in one day to pick up, there was a Gnostic tradition in Christianity, something I hadn't read, and a book fell on my head. What was that book? So I picked it up. Yeah, I've heard of this. I put it back up on the shelf above me. So I went to take the other book that I was going to take, and again, the book fell on my head. Second time. I picked it up. It was the Bhagavad Gita, 1968, purple, with Vishnu on the cover. I had been studying for 7 years independently of this religious tradition. And here, I took the book. I said, it must be, so I guess I'm supposed to read this. So as I read it, the epiphanies were coming. I was saying, yes, this is true. It was confirming all these things. Even though I didn't know the philosophy in that sense, it was confirming from the heart, yes, this is true. Yes, this is true. Yes, this is true. Prabhupada is so strong. His will was instituted in these books. All of you somehow or other have coming not only for prasadam and Hare Krishna, but you've also heard from Srila Prabhupada's words that he calculated in his books. Being his guard for 5 years, you would see Prabhupada so meticulously in the evening when all the people are gone back into home, he'd be translating, sometimes with his dictaphone, sometimes sitting just behind his desk and doing. And I had seen for years and years and years, sometimes we would also be there in the evening time alone with Srila Prabhupada, making sure no crazy folk comes in. And we saw for 5 years, I never saw Srila Prabhupada sleep. Never. He would lie on his bed and you'd hear this, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. In this way for hours until it was time that he would get up and to perform his duties. Maybe Hari Sari or one of the other, Shuddhakriti or someone may have seen Prabhupada sleep, but I never did. And I had many, many nights I was in Prabhupada's room. So these book, when I got this book, there were so many cheaters at that time. I won't name all of them, but in the 60s, there were so many bogus gurus. So I said, who is this Bhakti Vedanta Swami? Who is he? I wanted to see, is he a real guru or not? What did I know what a real guru is? But yet, that was anyone who knows me, I'm such a challenging personality that so I made a vow, I made a plan at that point in time. I want to go, I'm going to depend on God, even though I don't know who God is, I'm going to depend on God somehow or other to take me to this place. And although I had wealth and cars and stuff, I said, no, I'm going to hitchhike. I stuck my thumb out on the second car, drove me from San Diego all the way to the corner of Watsika in Venice, about 2 hours away. And I thought this was great. But what did I do? I made 4 pillars of questions to challenge Prabhupada. If he's a real guru, of course, this is in the 60s. So, and those things were, you have to know the absolute truth. You have to be able to know the process of the absolute truth. You have to be able to read my mind, and you have to be able to predict the future. This is what I thought, when you're 17, 18 years old, whatever. So as I walked across the lawn, there was one tall devotee with red hair, and he happened to be Srila Prabhupada's secretary, Shyam Sundar Prabhu. And there was no one else there, and I didn't know anyone, and I'd never been at the Los Angeles temple. But he said, "Do you want to see Srila Prabhupada?" I said, "Yes, that's what I came for." So he took me around the alley. We walked up the stairs into Prabhupada's quarters and then into his room. And there was, all I remember, there was maybe 15 people there and lots of sticks, saffron sticks up in the air. I had no idea what a dunda was. And so at that time, there were only 2 people wearing white, 2 grihastas. So I was having trouble sitting down because I was a football player and my legs were too developed. So Prabhupada, some of the devotees were crying as one of the Hare Krishna albums were playing, and I didn't understand what the reasons were. And Prabhupada looked around the room and he spotted me and he goes, "Why are you a Kripana?" And I'm thinking, what's Kripana? Kripana means miser. And he said, "Oh, you have abilities, you have intelligence, you have knowledge, you have gifts that have been given to you, but you're not using for Krishna, therefore you are Kripana." And now I got angry. I just trying to meet Prabhupada, all of a sudden he's blasting me. I'm thinking like this. I didn't even open my mouth. Then immediately he starts explaining what is the absolute truth. Krishna Prem, who is God? Krishna is God. Even though I didn't know who God was, he said, yes, Krishna is God. His consort Radharani. We are his servants. We are meant to develop love for God. So far, so good. So I'm still thinking, I'm angry. Why he called me a miser? Yet Prabhupada's answering all these questions. And so at that time, then the next one came, I'm thinking, well, he didn't read my mind, right? So, immediately he called for Pradyumna, his secretary, who went out of the room and came back with carrying this book, which is, I don't know, it was the biggest book I ever saw at that time. About yay big. It's just where the 10 commentaries where Srila Prabhupada would translate the Srimad Bhagavatam from. And so then he's flipping these pages, and I'm still thinking like, well, he answered these questions, but he didn't read my mind, he didn't predict the future. And I'm thinking like, he called me a miser, and I'm really angry about that. And so he's flipping these pages, and all of a sudden he goes to the 12th canto, the predictions of the age of Kali. And Prabhupada said, people will think they're beautiful by wearing long curly hair, which I had long curly hair at the time. Then there'll be no justice without money. People, if they live to be 25 years old, they'll be considered ripe old men. There'll be no food. They'll be living on seeds. And then the seeds are gone, they will become cannibals. Everyone was shocked. No one had heard the 12th canto before. We didn't even know there was a 12th canto, I think, at that time. So Prabhupada immediately defeated me. Immediately. And so I was still angry. As soon as he finished his darshan, he went back in the room. Before anyone could talk to me, I ran down those stairs. I went out that door. I went across the parking lot and realized I didn't have my car. I said, oh, okay. So I stuck out my thumb again, and a car came by and took me all the way to my parents' house. So as I got home, I was going over everything that Srila Prabhupada had said, all the truths that came through. So I realized you were looking for a real guru. What is your false ego is stopping you from recognizing he defeated you. Why don't you should surrender? No, I'm having this battle with myself. So anyway, finally I came the next morning. I borrowed my parents' car and I came to the Los Angeles temple, and I wrote out a check out for $1,000, which at that time was quite a big donation, as people would know. And so Karandar took it. Oh, you have to come up and give this to Prabhupada. I go, no. Being destroyed once by Prabhupada, I was a little fearful, which is the first time in my life because I'm not a very fearful person. So I said, no, that's okay. You can take it up there. No, but at least wait here. Okay. So he brought it up to Prabhupada. Prabhupada signed it, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I wish I would have saved it, but I didn't. It's some in the bank somewhere, who knows. Yeah. And he came back down and he said, Prabhupada said to tell me you have understood. So that was the first time I met with Srila Prabhupada, trying to defeat him and being defeated solely. But that was good for me. That's what I needed. Prabhupada knew what everyone, he would look through you and he would like see right through you. And you'd know your soul and everything about you. Prabhupada was like that. If you were close to him and he would just look at you, and you'd melt with love or you'd cower in shame and fear, one of the two. So even though I went back to school, in 1972, when was the Rath Yatra? I think it was 72 or 71? 70, no.
Yeah, 72.
72.
It was 73.
Well, anyway, there were some pastimes between there. I went back to college. In 1972, I flew with one of the devotees up to the Rath Yatra for the first time. And there, Prabhupada was on the Rath cart, and the Rath cart stopped. He was on Lady Subhadra's, and I was on the side. I didn't know anybody, or anything. I just chartered a plane and flew from San Diego to San Francisco. And Prabhupada got down off the cart, and then he saw me, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come, let's go." So Prabhupada proceeded to go into the bushes, and I'm following, and I don't even know what I'm doing, and I'm following in Prabhupada into the bushes, and Prabhupada was passing water, and the devotees are passing me the water and the towels and stuff. I'm washing Prabhupada's hands and stuff like that. Then we come back out, he patted him on the shoulder, he said, "Very good, I will see you again." And so that was my second time. Prabhupada, very shortly after that, we gave up everything. We gave up our funds and our things, and we joined the movement. Why? Because Prabhupada was that spiritual person that reached into our very hearts. When Prabhupada was on the planet, people would go from the East Coast to the West Coast, from wherever Prabhupada was on. There would be just days of driving where devotees would come just to go to that platform. So, in several Rath Yatras, the Prabhupada was so kind. When we were now doing books for Srila Prabhupada, he was so much into really the mercy of giving the mercy out to all the living entities who were suffering. He called these Western civilization, these were like asuras, these were like fools, rascals. He would not mince any word. Prabhupada was a lion preacher. He came in the tradition of Bhaktisiddhanta. His sannyas guru was Bhaktisiddhanta Kesara, who was known also as a lion. And Prabhupada was a lion preacher. What would you expect? It was once said by one of his teachers. He said, "This Krishna conscious movement is not for the weak-hearted. It's not for the lazy, and it's not for the cowards." So Prabhupada was a lion preacher. He was not fearful of anyone. He was happy, he was wonderful, and he was bold, and he was pushing, so no one would, this is that Prabhupada that we would see. So people would dedicate their lives to Prabhupada just to see him once a year when he would come to their location. This is that Prabhupada. So Prabhupada often was very kind to me. I got both the rose and the thunderbolt. Prabhupada was always soft like a rose and hard like a thunderbolt. So the soft like the rose, we were doing so many thousands of books in the BBT library party, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and myself and our other members, doing thousands and thousands of books. The problem was I was thinking, oh yes, we were in the press in the Sankirtan newsletter over and over, and I was thinking, oh, I must be good, starting to believe the press. Oh yes, we are doing good. Yes, we're doing this and that. We weren't doing anything. Prabhupada came to Chicago to inaugurate Kishore Kishori, and there are all the Radha Damodar parties and all the library parties. There were, and all the people, all the devotees from all the temples. There was like 500-600 devotees in Chicago for the installation. And there we were writing, oh, Mahabuddhi was like being a Sankirtan rock star or something. So we were believing the hype. So immediately, then there was a situation that Prabhupada was giving a darshan, a television show. So I knew wherever Prabhupada was, you'd always have to have a book table. If you didn't have a book table, you would get chastised. So the devotees there didn't set up a book table, so I helped set them up a book table. So Prabhupada was just in Chicago there in front of the cameras and just said, all of my disciples play full dandabats whenever they see me. And so the filming was going on and Prabhupada was talking. And then I kind of like came in the back after the table and gave sort of the namaskars, and sat down. Prabhupada turned to his secretary. And so I didn't know anything about it. Later, Hari Kesh at that time came up to me and said, you don't want to know what Prabhupada said. He wasn't very happy. He just told everyone to pay dandavats, and you just did the Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So I got hit there. Then again, that next morning, there was a big 500 people, a big Guru Puj. This is what to not do as a disciple. So, as a big Guru Puj, I think there were several of my godbrothers. I think there was Uddhama Shloka and their bhajan band that was there from Canada. And there was a big Guru Puj. And so right in the middle of Guru Puj, there was rocking, going well. Guru Kripa, who was here, Guru Kripa Prabhu Maharaj then, Prabhu, and myself and one devotee named Ron Cayley. We're doing what they didn't do it then. We were running and sliding along the floors and jumping up in the thing and crashing into people, all sorts of stuff. Prabhupada stopped the Guru Puj. Stopped it. And he goes, Mahabuddhi, what is this? This is not how Vaishnavas dance. And he said, Brahmananda, show him how to dance. And Brahmananda was kind of shocked. And he stuck up his hands and started doing the Swami, like this. I drifted back to the 500th person there in the room. And I couldn't even see Prabhupada. So in this way, Prabhupada, then again, there was another incident, and he called all the members of the library party in. He's been going, oh, Ganesham, oh, all these different names. And he comes to me and he just goes and passes. So Prabhupada knew that was in our heart was so much pratista, so much as a brahmachari, So I felt that I've offended my spiritual master so much that there's nothing left to do. So I put my bead bag in the brahmachari ashram, and I walked down to the Lake Michigan to commit suicide. So, what can you do if you're a pure devotee and you have his presence and you're offending a pure devotee? Your life is not worth anything. It's finished. So I felt like that. So I'm going to kill myself. And now I'm feeling I'm totally useless. I don't have any abilities. I don't know anything. Which is how we should feel, right? But, you know, it was different than when you're being glorified. Oh, you're distributing this, you're wonderful. Don't believe the hype. Oh, we were just instruments of Srila Prabhupada. And that's the difference. He empowered so many of his disciples, men and women, both grihastas. Most of this movement spread by grihastas, not by sannyasis, by grihastas, historically. So anyway, I was walking about 2 blocks down. Prabhupada somehow or other sent a car with Satsvarup Maharaj. And then with Satsvarup Maharaj, I'm hearing this, Mahabuddhi. I didn't respond. Mahabuddhi. Didn't respond. Still walking. Mahabuddhi, Srila Prabhupada sent me to come get you. Can't go back without you. I go, oh God. So I ended up going back with Satsvarup Maharaj. Prabhupada was staying in another Grihasta's house. And so I just went and sat by the shoes outside the door. So I hear Prabhupada was saying to Satsvarup, so where is he? Well, he was just here. And someone said, he's out by the shoes. And Prabhupada said, what is he doing there? Bring him in. So I walk in, and first I remembered I paid full dandavats. I already blew that one a couple days before. So I paid full dandavats to Prabhupada. And then I turned to him feeling totally useless, just, completely void of anything that I can do right. And then I turned to Prabhupada, and he had this big, huge, smiling grin, almost laughing. You finally got it, One of those kinds of things where, as a brahmachari, was one of the best smashes that I ever had, because you realize that you're just an instrument for your spiritual man. You're not qualified to anything. Anyone who feels I'm qualified as a disciple to do all these things, and people are glorifying, you should just Haribo Prabhu. All glories to Prabhupada, pass it forward. Because what is our qualifications? We're disciples. And as long as the spiritual master is empowering you, you have some empowerment. If the spiritual master instantaneously pulls that plug, you are nothing. You have no ability. We didn't know who Krishna was. We didn't know who Radharani was. We didn't even know how to eat with our right hand. We didn't know how to wipe our butt with our left hand. We knew nothing. Without Prabhupada, we knew nothing. So people are walking, Maharaj, he's just qualified, and that's qualified. We are only qualified to the extent that the spiritual master has empowered us to follow his instructions. If you're sincere, what will happen? You'll get the opportunity to serve. You will get sadhu sangha, and you get a chance to serve. One day, Prabhupada, and there's so many Sankirtan stories, I probably should tell them some other time. One day, we were in temple. We had gathered all this big professors. He was the big man on campus. He was teaching Sanskrit. He proposed himself as a yogi. He had so many followers. This was at Temple University in Philadelphia. And we arranged him to come to Prabhupada. And we're thinking normally when we bring a professor to Prabhupada, he's very kind and cordial and they're talking very nicely. So we thought the same thing. We bring this professor in. Prabhupada tore into, you're a cheater, you're a liar, you're a cheater, you're bogus. And we're all like, kind of like, oops. And this Indian Sanskrit Hindu professor was posing himself as a yogi. He was a Bengali. Prabhupada was tearing into him, just stripping him down. And we felt a little sad about, we brought him here, now he's just completely ripped. So Prabhupada could be like a thunderbolt. And other times, he would give like a rose, because we distributed so many books. Prabhupada would call us up in New York and in San Francisco. He'd call us up, Bhakti Tirtha and myself and Satsaru. He'd call us up one at a time, and he'd smell a rose, and then he'd give it to us our hand. We'd go and sit down. He'd do the same to the other two. Then he'd call us up again, and he'd eat a piece of orange, and he'd call us back up and give us that orange. So many times he did this, or he would give us his garland, or we're in his room. One day, now some stories, if I have any time left. Anyway, if there isn't, should we go on or stop? Oh, go ahead.
I overtalk myself.
Okay, so one day, when we spent 5 years as Prabhupada's guard, all of his darshans, we could keep anybody out. I don't care, GBC, XYZ. If Prabhupada didn't want to see him, they're not coming in, right? So that was my service. Probably the most hated guy in Vrindavan and Mayapur. You want to come see Prabhupada? Uh-oh, there's this guy at the store. You gotta and I didn't take any bribes. So it was like, that was the guard for Prabhupada. So one day, Prabhupada would have someone who would cook prasadam for him, some cookies or sweets, and the kids would come in and Prabhupada would hand out. If there was enough, we'd give it to all the devotees but all the guests had to have it, okay? So one day, the person who makes, the girl or man, whatever, who makes the prasadam was sick. No prasadam. The whole room's about 50 people in this room, and Prabhupada looks at me and goes, and I'm going, oh my God. So I went back, is there any prasadam? Oh, there's no prasadam. There was some so-so, the devotee didn't do this, whatever. So they were taking the sweets. They just made these sweets, and they're putting on this offering plate to give to Radha Shyam Sundar. I offer my obeisances all the time for this. So I took about 30 of the sweets, 30, 40 of the sweets that they were making for the deities, and I put them all on the transfer plate and just took them to Prabhupada. Now, I didn't know what to do. We were, newer devotees, and so are we supposed to bow down and Namo Vishnu, do the 3 prayers and stuff like that for offering at that time? So I was standing in this quandary, and Prabhupada looked at me like, what kind of disciple I got here? Is these nutcases, So he said, pull off the cover. So I pulled the cover up. He looked at it and says, okay, now you can distribute. Oh. If the spiritual master can just see it, so we know Krishna can eat by his eyes, he can eat by his ears, he can interchange any of his different senses. The spiritual master also, simply by seeing, he accepted, therefore it becomes prasada. Interesting. One day, there was a person, and the whole room was full, and I would take the prasadam and go to the back so I wouldn't miss anyone. Because Prabhupada said every guest must have it. And if a guest didn't have it, I'd have to run out the door and give it to him. That was how strict Prabhupada was to make sure every guest got prasadam. So one day in the back, there was this large Indian gentleman, must have been 6'6", 6'7". I mean, normally you don't see Indians that tall. Very broad shoulders. He was wearing a chadar over his head, so you couldn't really see his face, but he had a very square chin. He had shoulders about twice the size of mine, and he was sitting. And as he was sitting there, the darshan came over, and I got to the door, but he was already gone. So Prabhupada said, a guest has left. You must give him prasadam. You must give him prasadam. When Prabhupada would speak to me, it wasn't like, can you please, you must, very direct. Spiritual master is on reverence. You have to serve very much on reverence, very much direct, not like, later you can Vishwamba Seva, if you have some relationship you can do, but in our stage, you have to, whatever Prabhupada say, you immediately do. So what happened was, I ran out the door with a plate of prasadam and a napkin, and there was no one by the door here outside Prabhupada's room. And then I went down that whole sideway. Prabhupada's, obviously his samadhi wasn't there, so it was a straight thing along the side. There was nobody there. I ran out the gate, and they're about 50 feet down the gate, and this is only about 15 seconds after Prabhupada's darshan was over. This devotee was there. He was huge, much bigger than I. And then I go, "Excuse me, Haribo, Haribo," and he stopped, and he turned around, and I looked at him, and I go like, "Who is this person?" And he goes, "My spiritual master has sent me to give you prasadam. So will you please accept?" So I gave him this plate, and his hands were like twice of mine. And he put them in his hands. And he said, "Your spiritual master is very kind," in English. And it was almost like, so I bowed down, gave him the prasad, turned around, he was gone. Prabhupada would tell us as guard, he would have us put, many times he'd have us put singasans on Gaurnitatai's altar, because today Brahma is here for darshan, Narada is here for darshan. I am sure that person was some exalted Kshatriya or someone from, times past, eternal, came for Prabhupada's darshan. Sometimes the ladies who would come in, you would swear like they were so perfectly dressed, everything was perfect. I used to think, I don't know who is coming for Prabhupada's darshan. I would be forced to let everyone in who was coming in stuff. But sometimes Prabhupada would be meeting with people, dignitaries, when he said Narada's coming, Brahma's coming, many people who wanted to take darshan of Srila Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada was the emissary of Radha and Krishna for this planet. They would come and take his darshan. So as a guard, we would, and running his darshans, there were so many different activities that would take place in that exchange that was, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was so meticulous in giving everyone prasadam, and giving everyone their heart. So I'm going to end, because I'm way over, but I'll tell one final story. Most meaningful thing to me, we were on a morning walk in Atlanta. And Prabhupada turned and pointed to the city of Atlanta. And he said, all those people there, they will all leave. They will go to the hills. They will go to the forest. The only people that will stay there are the dacoits. If anyone stays, they'll be raped and pillaged and everything will go. And I said, I was next to Prabhupada. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. It says that in the end of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he said, no. Bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami bhudi yogam tam yena mama upayantite. And I was nodding my head and I said, I don't know what Srila Prabhupada. So they said, repeat after me. Te sam, and now it's like the Bhagavatam class. Te sam, satata, satata. So I'm going through the whole verse like this in the morning walk, about 25 people around, and now there's this big circle, and Prabhupada's spending this time going through this whole thing. So as he finishes it, I do my repeat of that verse, and I'm about, very close to Prabhupada, and he said to me, you will chant this? And I almost fell backwards. And some devotee was behind me, at least, kind of propped me up. Prabhupada's energy was incredulous. And so I folded my hand, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then he said, every day? Now that time, luckily that devotee was behind me, catching me. Prabhupada's energy was so strong, and I gathered myself and I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, nodded his head, and he started on his walk again. Then he turned about 2 or 3 steps ahead and turned to me and said, in this way, Krishna will always provide you the intelligence. So by that blessing, for the last 50 years, we've been chanting that verse whenever we speak, whenever we're asked to speak, every day, mornings. And in this way, Srila Prabhupada, there are so many things you can say about his personally, his form, and what to speak of. Everyone knows his books and his glories. But for me, I miss his personal association. Once you have the opportunity of being around Prabhupada, you've never met anyone in such a regal person. He was a regal representative of the Supreme Lord. And he was so kind, and he was so powerful that just being around him, you'd feel just, you can do anything. So, in relationship to my glorification of Srila Prabhupada is that we cannot glorify him enough. There's anyone who comes to this West, any preacher, I don't care what moth, what thing, whatever, they owe everything to Srila Prabhupada. If they don't give their respects to Srila Prabhupada, then finished. He brought everything to the West, otherwise we would be blind. We wouldn't know anything of Krishna consciousness. Everyone in this room is indebted. Whether you're a direct disciple or you're a grand disciple, whatever it is the surrender to the Guru Varga, because without that mercy, without that kripa, we will not make any advancement in Krishna consciousness. Zero. So I'll end this with great humility and prayer that let us glorify Srila Prabhupada, because his disappearance day is coming just around in a couple days or so, and pray. Every year I ask Prabhupada how to become serious, and every year except one, he said, just become serious. And then he would say, Krishna's already helping, as if we thought we were the doer. Krishna's doing everything through. Prabhupada is engaging people. Now still they're being engaged. The least we could do is follow what he says. So I pray that with the whole world erupting almost in world war, with craziness all around us, with asuras leading everything into darkness, that the light that Srila Prabhupada came to give not become extinguished by our lack of revolutionary spirit, our lack of sticking bold preaching, and help this crazy world and the mismatch of society by giving them the truth that Prabhupada spent his very lifeblood in giving to all of us. Hare Krishna. Panchakalpatubhyascha kripa sindhu bhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Jai Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Guru Varga Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Sankirtan Movement Ki Jai. Srimati Radharani Ki Jai. Gaur Pramananda Hari Hari Bo. Jai, thank you. Hare Krishna. Please forgive me if I offended anyone. But Prabhupada told me to preach boldly, so I'm sorry. Sorry, I went over too. I should have stopped.